Okay, folks, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. This is our first monthly webinar for new employees of dealerships, and we appreciate everybody's taking the time to join us today. My name is Marlon Parrott with MADA. I've also got Justin Oswald of MADA with me. Just a little background on us. For folks who may not know who we are Missouri Auto Dealers Association, and the dealership that you work for purchases some of the insurance that they get through us. So Justin and I are officially safety and insurance nerds. And again, we just appreciate everybody joining us for our topic today. To get started, what we're going to talk about today is safety in your new job and exactly what that includes. The very first thing is a dealership stance on your safety. I just want to kind of iterate to everybody that your dealership obviously cares about your safety. They care about you being injury-free in the workplace. If they didn't, you wouldn't be with us on this webinar today. So I just wanted to kind of back that up and let you guys know that the dealerships you work for are very proactive, and they took a little time out of your day to have you guys attend this webinar and listen to us. We're also going to talk about your individual responsibilities for safety. What does that look like for you? What are you as an employee responsible for? We're going to talk about safety with chemicals. We're going to talk about personal protective equipment that's available to you that you need to use. We're going to talk about the importance of good housekeeping, emergencies, driving safely, reporting unsafe conditions to your supervisor, and in fact, what to do if an injury does occur. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's talk about your dealership's position regarding safety. Like I said, you guys are on the webinar here, so obviously the dealerships you work with have a vested interest in your safety and want you to have a healthy career with them as injury-free as possible. Safety is important because being safe at your job benefits everybody. Not just your employer and your coworkers, but also you. No pain, no missed work, no permanent disabilities. So we really want you to be safe and don't take shortcuts in your jobs. Safety on the job also results in lower costs to your employer. Less injuries, less downtime, less pain for you equals lower expenses for the company. Companies that have better expense structures are more able to provide raises, more benefits, additional or new equipment for you to use in your jobs, etc. So obviously safety benefits everybody involved and everybody that's watching this today. Okay, let's talk about your individual responsibilities in safety. What are you responsible for as an employee of your dealership? First and foremost, follow all rules, policies, and procedures as established by your employer. These are extremely important. Rules and policies and procedures don't exist to limit what you can do. They exist to keep you safe and to protect you in the work area. So make sure that you understand what those are. And if your dealership has a policy, for example, that you wear seatbelts when you're driving your car, make sure that you adhere to those policies at all times. You also have responsibility for reporting any unsafe equipment or acts to your supervisor immediately. Use the safety equipment that you are provided. Let your supervisor know if you need safety gear or personal protective equipment that you don't have to do your job safely. You're also responsible to make sure to report any injuries to your employer as soon as they occur, regardless of whether or not any medical treatment is required, regardless of whether or not you think the injury was severe. Your supervisor needs to know for other safety reasons, watching the equipment, other issues that you may not be aware of. So they need to make sure that any incidents that occur that you do let your supervisor know as soon as you possibly can. Your responsibilities also include keeping your work areas clean and in good condition, and overall just taking a proactive approach to working safely. We want you to be a leader, not a follower when it comes to setting the pace for safety. Make a difference, okay? Make a difference. Let's talk about working safely with chemicals. Everybody in the workplace and even at home eventually comes in contact with hazardous chemicals. Dealership is certainly no exception. There are hazardous chemicals all over the facility and things that you need to be aware of, the hazards, how to work with them safely, what the composition of the chemicals are, and how to properly use them. A few pointers we're talking about chemicals. Never, never, never take chemicals for granted. Never assume that you won't have a problem just because you never have. Some injuries related to hazardous chemicals occur only after years of exposure. Make sure that you read the safety data sheet for each chemical that you use. Know where SDSs are kept in the dealership. If you don't know, ask your supervisor. Any of the hazardous chemicals that you use, you need to be familiar with the hazards related to those, and the SDSs as well as the labels are the best source of information for that. Even if you don't think you have a hazardous job, you may just be washing cars or waxing vehicles or detailing. Some of the engine degreasers and the wheel cleaners that you use can cause serious health effects if you don't use a proper type of gloves. So make sure that you're familiar with the hazards relating to the chemicals that you use. You also want to make sure to keep containers closed until needed and make sure that they are labeled properly. One of the biggest challenges to safety that we see in our visits to dealerships are containers that are repurposed and not properly labeled. Just for instance, in a detail facility, if somebody were to take a Gatorade container out of the trash, some of the car soaps that we use are the exact same color as the blue ice type of Gatorade. So make sure that if you repurpose a container that you clearly label it with what chemical is in it. Also, don't eat, smoke, or drink where you use or store toxic chemicals. If you have an open can of soda or you have a cup of coffee on a bench in the same area that you use aerosol chemicals, anytime you spray that can of chemical, you're actually causing mists and chemicals to go into the coffee, into the soda, and you can ingest those. So you want to make sure that you keep those completely clear from any area where toxic or caustic chemicals are being used. Also, very important, again, we're talking about personal protective equipment. Use the proper type of PPE for the chemical that you are using. You may need safety glasses or a face shield. You may need chemical resistant gloves. You might need a respirator. You may need protective clothing. All depends upon the hazards of the chemicals. Know the 5 routes of exposure for chemicals and what type of PPE that you need. The route of exposure is how the chemical actually affects your system, gets into your system. Do you breathe it? Do you ingest it? Is it absorbed through your skin? Is it absorbed through your eyes? Okay, how does that chemical get into your system? Make sure that you understand that, and then you'll know what type of gloves or protective clothing or safety glasses or whatever type of protection you need to protect you from the chemicals that you're exposed to. Let's talk a little more in depth about personal protective equipment. What exactly does that mean? Basically, PPE is anything that you wear to protect yourself from a hazard in the workplace. Could be, again, eye protection, protective clothing, aprons, gloves, chemical resistant or cut resistant gloves, respirators, hearing protection to protect you from loud noises. You got to know what type of safety equipment is available. You've got to know how to use it, how often to replace it, when it needs to be replaced, how to clean it, how to store it, etc. Eye protection, for instance, eye protection has to be rated under the ANSI standard, the American National Standard Institute. We get a lot of comments from people wearing prescription glasses, and they say, well, these are safety glasses because my eye doctor said so. If those glasses aren't stamped somewhere on them with ANSI Z87.1, they are not safety glasses and they will not adequately protect you from flying objects. Okay. Again, PPE needed is determined by the job at hand. Refer to safety data sheets when using chemicals. Consider hazards of other jobs. What kind of hazards are possible? Are burns, cuts, scrapes, punctures, flying objects, dust, or radiation possible? Pick your personal protective equipment based on those hazards. Know how to clean it, inspect it, and store it. How often does a respirator have to be used? How often do you replace safety glasses if they get scratched, dirty, or broken and they don't work anymore? Make sure to contact your supervisor if you have any questions or need your PPE replaced. Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about housekeeping. Slips, trips, and falls are a leading cause of serious injuries to dealership employees. Always keep your work areas clean. A lot of times during our dealership visits, Justin and I will hear employees say, well, but I always clean up at the end of the day. Let's take a second and think about how funny that sounds. Nobody slips and falls on trash or spills at the end of the day after they go home. They slip and fall while they're working in the workplace. So between jobs, make sure you pick up, keep your spills cleaned up, sweep up, keep the hoses and cords out of the way, etc. Better yet, let's don't even throw trash on the floor. Let's put it in the trash receptacles instead. We hear this a lot in detail facilities where they're cleaning out a lot of vehicles and the trash goes on the floor. It's easier to just pick it up and throw it right in the trash can when it comes out. Keep hoses and cords that you aren't using rolled up and put away. We get an incredible amount of rolled ankles from people stepping on an air hose that wasn't being used and was left out in the walkway. So if they're not being used, roll them up and put them away and get them out of the walkways. Clean up your spills of chemicals immediately. Keep razor blades put up and discard properly. Make sure again to keep container labels of chemicals in good condition where they can be read. Soiled shop rags, make sure to put them in proper containers, not on floors, in cardboard boxes, or in buckets. Store them only in metal, UL-approved containers with self-closing lids. Soiled shop rags can actually spontaneously combust and cause a fire when you least want it. So make sure to keep those put in proper listed containers with self-closing lids. We're going to talk a little bit next about when you're on your job, how to prevent cuts and punctures. 3 most common dealership employee injuries are to hands, fingers, and eyes. Just to talk about preventing hand and finger injuries, a few suggestions. We got a lot of folks that use razor blades, okay? If you're going to use a razor blade to scrape a sticker, clean a window, clean off a piece of metal, something of that nature, don't ever use a razor blade without a blade holder, okay? When you're scraping or cutting with a razor blade, put it in a holder. They only cost a couple bucks. They can save you a lot of finger injuries. Wear fingerless mechanics gloves to prevent cuts and scrapes to hands and knuckles. Mechanics gloves are also provide protection from vibration stress from air tools and burns from hot engines. Okay. When you dispose of a razor blade, dispose of it properly. Don't throw it on the floor. Don't lay it on the benches. Don't let them fall off on the floor. Get a container for disposal, such as a cardboard box with a slit in the top. Get a coffee can, something to put them in when you throw them away. If you're going to just discard one razor blade, take some tape and tape that blade before you throw it in the trash. Think about the individual that has to come along and dump that trash. They don't want to get cut either if they pick up that trash and that razor blade cuts through a trash bag. Okay, never carry a razor blade in your mouth or behind your ear. As silly as this sounds, we see this. We see guys run around in detail shops with a razor blade in their mouth while they're working on other things and they've got their hands full. Imagine what would happen if he tripped and fell face first with a razor blade stuck in his mouth. Just don't do it. Other gloves for preventing cuts and punctures, if you're going to be moving sharp metal components or trashing vehicle body parts, etc. If you work in a body shop, make sure to wear leather gloves or just a good quality cut resistant glove. Again, these are the 3 most common injuries per body part to dealership employees. And unfortunately, a lot of times the most easily preventable, but we can't prevent them if we don't wear the safety equipment that's provided for that. So very important to do that. Let's talk about emergencies a little bit. Do you know what to do in the event of an emergency? Where to take shelter if a tornado or other severe weather event occurs? What about exit routes, rally points? If you have to evacuate the building because of fire alarm, where do you evacuate to? How do people get accounted for? How do we know that everybody in your department actually got out of the building? What's the plan for that? How do you report a fire? What alarm system is a dealership going to use? And another one, unfortunately, that we have to deal with nowadays, heaven forbid, what if it's workplace violence or an active shooter? What's the plan? How do you react? Where do you hide? What kind of training is a dealership make available for that? Do you know what those plans are? Okay. Do you also know the location of emergency equipment, such as first aid kits, fire extinguishers, eye wash stations? What about AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, if available? If your dealership provides them, have you been trained or are there people available that have been trained to use those? Know how to use this emergency equipment properly. Know that fire extinguishers and eye wash stations need to be kept clear and accessible for at least 3 feet in all directions. You don't want to find out that somebody stuck a trash can in front of the eye wash station when a battery blew up and you can't see, okay? Make sure that you know where the equipment is, make sure that it's accessible and usable at the time. If you don't know what to do in the case of an emergency or you need more information or training, make sure to ask your supervisor for more training on that. We also have some training that we provide that your supervisor can contact us if they need more in-depth training. Let's talk a little bit about driving safety. Almost everyone in a dealership drives a dealership or customer-owned vehicle eventually. I'd be willing to bet that most of the folks on our webinar here today either drove or rode in a vehicle coming to work. So this is something that everybody's exposed to. A few things that we need to talk about. When operating a vehicle, follow all laws and wear your seat belt. Number one cause of fatality to dealership employees is a vehicle crash with no seat belt in use. We hear all kinds of stories. We hear salespeople tell us we're just going to be in the car for a second. We have service technicians tell us that they didn't want to get grease from their uniforms on the seatbelt. We always tell them that your lives are worth more than the grease on that seatbelt. If you're going to operate a car, wear the seatbelt. It's extremely important. If you're in service or sales, ask if your dealership has established demo or test drive routes. Many of them do. Follow those. They exist for your safety. Let your supervisor know when you're driving and how long you'll be gone. Let them know if you have anybody else with you. Take a cell phone with you, but never, never, never use the cell phone while you are driving. Phone calls and texts can wait. You are as likely to be in a fatal vehicle crash using a cell phone as you are if you're driving while intoxicated. So just think about that for a second. Your odds are just the same on using a cell phone as it is if you're driving intoxicated. Okay, let's talk about reporting unsafe conditions. Report any unsafe condition, equipment, or act that you notice by coworkers or safety corrections needed immediately to your supervisor. It's very important to illustrate that your supervisor doesn't work in the work area with you. You do. They're not going to see the jacks that might have a problem or equipment that needs to be replaced or additional equipment that you need. You guys are the experts in your job with the equipment that you use. Make sure that you let your supervisors know if you have a mechanical problem with a piece of equipment or something needs to be repaired or something needs to be replaced. Let them know as soon as you possibly can. It is your safety. Take an interactive role. Just don't assume that somebody else is going to do that. Okay. And kind of one of the last things that we need to talk about in our time this morning or this afternoon is if an injury occurs, what to do. The most important thing is if you have an injury that occurs to you, make sure that you report it to your supervisor or designated person immediately, regardless of how severe you think it may be. Even if you weren't injured and you had an incident, your supervisor needs to know about that if there was a problem with a piece of equipment or a process or something that needs to be looked at and reviewed. So please make sure that you report those as soon as possible. Any medical attention needed must be authorized by the dealership. It's very important for everybody here to understand that if you choose to go to a physician other than who the company provides or the insurance company allows, you may be required to pay for it by yourself if it's not authorized by your employer. So make sure that you report the claim immediately so that it can be authorized by the dealership and they can get those incidents taken care of properly. Think about what caused the injury and what specifically you can do to prevent the same injury from happening again. We call these near misses. It's an incident that occurred that nobody got hurt that could have turned out worse. Take those near misses, pay attention to those near misses, think about what could have happened and what could you do next time to maybe prevent that from actually becoming an accident or somebody really becoming injured because of that. So just take a few minutes to think that over. If you were injured because you did not follow a safety rule policy of the dealership, you may be required to pay a portion of the expenses for treatment yourself. Again, we talked about the importance of the policies and the rules established by your company, that you need to follow those. Absolutely make sure you follow those. If you're injured because you failed to use safety equipment that your company required, they could actually make you, or the insurance company could actually make you pay for a portion of those injuries yourself. So kind of in just finishing up, our goal was to keep our seminar within 15 to 20 minutes. Looks like we're going to let you guys get back to work. We appreciate everybody's time again. I do want to say congratulations on your new job. Our goal, and I know your dealership's goal, is to help you guys have a long and healthy dealership career without incident or injury. Justin and I exist to do just that, to work with the dealerships, to provide training and additional information and everything we can to keep you guys safe and healthy. And we certainly need your help to do that. Any questions, again, go to your supervisor. They're always welcome to get a hold of us. They know how to get a hold of us for any more information pertinent to chemicals or any more detailed stuff like that we need to get information we need to get back to the dealerships, and we're happy to do that. So we wish each and every one of you a long and healthy dealership career. Now we want you to go forth and be safe. Thank you again for your time this afternoon. We appreciate you guys tuning in on our webinar, and please let us know if you have questions or if we can be of service in any way to helping you guys be safe and have a long, healthy career. Have a great afternoon.